My name is Gabe Cook. I'm the ciderologist. Welcome to Camera's World of Cider series. Today I am in Hardanger. So here we are, finally arrived in Hardanger Fjord. This is the heart and the home of Norwegian cider, and what a sight it is. Have you seen a more majestic and beautiful place making cider anywhere in the world? It's absolutely fabulous and interesting. Looking up the valley sides, you have the fjord, you then have the farms, and you hit the tree line, and then you're quickly into the snow and the glaciers. It's quite spectacular. But the fact is that apples do grow here. We're at a very, very high latitude. If we were in North America, we would be like in the middle of Hudson Bay. We would be way into central, almost northern Canada, far beyond where you'd be able to grow apples over there. So why are apples able to grow here? It's all down to the Gulf Stream, this fantastic warm water that's brought up from the equator, up from the Caribbean, and it gives off its warmth and its heat into Northern Europe and makes it an incredibly mild place. Here in the fjords, not only do we have this warmth, but we also have the protection of great storms by these incredibly steep, glacial, driven valleys. Absolutely fantastic. So it does get cold here, of course, but apples are incredibly hardy fruit. All they need is an opportunity to flower in the spring, just as we are right now, and then over the summer to be able to have enough warmth, enough light to be able to grow their fruit, and the result are fantastic and beautiful, clean, fruity, acid-driven ciders that are classic to Hardanger. They are absolutely fantastic. So here we are in the heart of Hardanger Fjord, the beautiful little village of 𝗚𝗯𝗲. Behind us we have one of the oldest hotels within the whole of Norway, 300 years old. This is where we will be staying, and the weather is shining for us here. And the people of Norway, they are fun people, they are bright people, they like to eat and drink. But more so than that, they like to support their local food and drink. And this is where cider has presented itself as an opportunity over the course of the last 20 years or so. As we've discussed, apples do grow within this environment. So there is this old heritage of making a cider. Often it's referred to as an apple wine on account of it being quite high alcohol with the addition of extra sugar to bring that alcohol level further up, but also being a still product. But the way that alcohol is managed within Norway means it's actually quite hard to market and to sell it. Now this means it was as late as the early 2000s that apple growers were permitted to make cider, and it wasn't until 2016, only 6 years ago, that apple growers were able to make cider and sell cider from the farm directly to consumers. But marketing and selling cider in Norway, and all alcohol in fact, is not an easy task, and it was only in the early 2000s that apple growers were legally allowed to make cider for sale into the wine monopoly and into restaurants. And only 2016 that these cider makers were able to sell directly to people from the farm. This is a monumental change, and because we're in this beautiful environment, the concept of cider tourism is something that is really starting to come to the fore, and that's very strongly why the Ciderfesten that we're here for is a really, really important thing to drive awareness within the local community, more broadly in Norway and internationally, about just how fantastic Norwegian cider can be. Let's go and have an explore.
Food is so important to cider here that there are cider restaurants. Here we are at 𝗖𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗴 where we're having a fantastic meal. Come and have a look.
Hello everybody, my name is 𝗪𝗏𝗏. I am a sommelier and a palmelier here at the cidderhuset Ola Kår at 𝗧 in Hardanger. I wanted to tell you very shortly about the history of the cider, because we are making great cider right here in this region where we today have 23 producers. But it did not begin here, the history of the cider. It began long away from here, back in Tian in Central Asia, where we saw the development of a fruit forest many millions years ago. And this development of fruit attracted great animals like the bears, but also the horses that with time and development transported via the Silk Road the apples and the fruits into Mesopotamia, an area where the art of grafting evolved around 4,000 years ago. It was very important because then you could be sure what kind of apple variety you would have the following season, the following years. Very important. All this knowledge, the Romans were very keen in recording in a written context. Further, the monks, they took care of this written record and also expanded into later England, for example, Yorkshire, and also from Yorkshire into Bergen, and then here in 𝗚𝗏𝗏 in Hardanger. So in the 13th century, the apples arrived here, and also the art of grafting. After the Reformation, when the Catholicism disappeared, we have the priests, but also the passionate people of this region keeping the tradition very much alive. We saw that the imported impulses down from the continent up to Hardanger here, imported fruit trees as well. And 100 years ago we had the monopoly here in Norway, meaning that the cider did not disappear. It just went into the basement for later to arrive again outside in high daylight and sunlight in 2009, where we got the protected designation of origin. And in 2016, the change in law, very important, so the farmers here were able to sell their products from their farm without a middleman, making a profit, and thereby keeping the long traditions all the way back from Tian Shan very much alive.
It's incredible to think that on these narrow margins of land between the fjord and the mountains, apples have been grown here for hundreds of years. And although once upon a time those orchards would have been large trees well spaced apart, today it's what you see before us. Smaller trees, dwarfing rootstock on trellis and wires, densely planted together, gaining all of that lovely warmth from the fjord. The varieties that are grown here are classically things like Discovery and Gravenstein and Aroma, apples that give ciders with lovely freshness, fruitiness and aromatic characteristics. It's not just apples that are grown, however. We also have cherries, pears, plums, I think. And it's been a very challenging environment for growing apples between the fjord and the mountain, this tight strip of land on very steep land. This is where the apple trees are grown for the cider here in Hardanger. Once upon a time, these apple trees would have been much larger, broadly planted. That's standard, that traditional system. Today, it's what you see before us, dwarfing rootstock, densely planted, on trellis, very easy for hand picking and for managing. As I say, is there anywhere more beautiful possibly in the world that cider is made? the Hardanger region is investing a lot of time and money and effort into the tourism opportunity that cider affords. When you've got such a spectacular landscape and such fantastic local produce, why wouldn't you want to try and bring here to taste the product, to meet the makers, and to really live the experience? I think this is something which is obviously fantastic and something that other cider making areas could take note of. If you invest into something, if you provide the opportunity, bring people here, they're going to explore, they're going to enjoy, and they're going to go away not only with some fantastic bottles of cider, but a newfound love and appreciation for that drink, and they will tell all their friends about it. If you live in a local cider area, try and do something to try and facilitate the growth of a tourism opportunity. So we're here at the 𝗪𝗶𝗱𝗃 Cidery, and it gives me great pleasure to say hello to Joa. This is your place, this is your home, these are your ciders.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what 𝗪𝗃 Cider is all about.
So my dream has always been like to get a little bit back to the roots, how cider was made before in Hardanger, and maybe take the quality some steps up, you know. But using old varieties has always been an inspiration. And also this combining it with new thinking and new ways, like with hops, 𝗚𝗏𝗏, using different techniques. So it's this mix of new and old that's always been very interesting.
And so what's special about Hardanger, the history or the weather or the climate? What makes this place special for making cider?
Have you seen outside?
Yes.
So it's really steep, right? And you have these big mountains behind. It always gives water in the summer times. It gives a lot of minerals from avalanche and but with the water coming down. So you have a really good soil, and you also have this big fjord in the middle. And in the winter time, this will actually work as a heat.
A source of heat and warmth.
Yeah. So it will not get so cold here, and in the summertime it gives moist, and it's a really nice place for the apples.
Yeah.
And you are really far north, so you get these complex apples with a lot of acidity, a lot of sugar, a lot of aroma. So it's a great place for being an apple.
Absolutely. And that is what you described. That is kind of the classic flavor profile of Hardanger ciders. Is this sort of clean fruit and acid expression. Do you, if you were to taste a Hardanger classic apple Hardanger cider in a lineup of other apple ciders from around the world, do you think that you could pick out the Hardanger cider?
Yeah, for sure. We have tried this many times, and Oh, yeah. Are you going to test me?
Maybe later. Of course.
No, but it is. You have some of these flavors that you recognize, and this nice acid and these clean flavors. And this is Hardanger, you know. It is clean, and this is maybe also the reason why we like making the cider the way we do. We want this nice and clean flavor with this sharp acidity, and so it is special. And I think the world will really love it.
The world will know very shortly just how fantastic Hardanger cider is because of this video.
So. Nice.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe we should go and taste some of these fantastic ciders.
It's made of aroma and discovery. It has a lot of sweetness, a lot of acidity, and was supposed to be like this nice aperitif for like light dishes. It was my plan to like get a lot of Norwegians to like cider. So if you have a cider with a lot of sweetness and sugar acidity, it's like a great choice to get people to drink cider. So all the ciders has a history or from the region Hardanger. The first one is 𝗨𝗏𝗲. It's a guy called 𝗪𝗏𝗲.
We have an old farming village. It's a hamlet, like a cluster town. So there are about 30 houses, really close together. And that used to be the farming community on Laga. And this all sprung out of one farm, owned by the 𝗨𝗏𝗲. This is really an old word for judge. So he was appointed by the king in Norway. This is about 800 years ago. So he ruled this part of the country. He was responsible for solving disputes among farmers and the people in the fjord. So he was naturally very powerful. And that's why his life ended quite soon, or quite early. He lived probably around 30 years. And then in the early 1300s, he was found in the fjord, floating, and they found him headless. So we do think someone disagreed with the way he ruled things.
So here we are at the fantastic 𝗪𝗏𝗄 cidery in Hardanger Fjord, one of the largest cider makers in the region, and we've just been given a fantastic tasting session by Joar, who's the cider maker here, and I'm going to just take you quickly through some of the ciders that he has presented. First of all, here we have the 𝗵𝗿, which is a sort of classic, traditional, old-fashioned, he described it, Hardanger cider, a little bit higher in alcohol, 9%, and using the classic apple varieties that they're growing here, the 𝗪𝗏𝗲, the 𝗪𝗏𝗏, the 𝗪oma, and the 𝗪scoveri. You can see it's sort of light, pale golden color, highly aromatized, really clean, fresh, green characters. Let's have a taste. Oh yeah, the acidity is really bright and brisk and shining through. Absolutely gorgeous. Next up, we've got the 𝗚𝗯𝗲 𝗖𝗆. The 𝗚𝗯𝗲 means bumblebee. And apparently, it's a name that you give to somebody if they've made a little bit of a fool of themselves, but in a pleasant and non-teasing kind of way. And this is a great example of some of the new wave of innovation that's happening within cider within Hardanger, because we have the addition of some hops in here, a little bit of citra has gone in, and also the use of some red currants and raspberries to give a little bit of that beautiful pink coloration. This has very obviously been created towards a market that's looking for some of more of these rosé type characters, and it absolutely delivers on the nose. We've got wonderful intense red fruits, unsurprisingly given the characters that have been added in there, intense kind of strawberry, but the clever little citrusy character from the hops coming through. On the palate, a little bit lower on the acidity, a little bit more textural, a little bit sweeter, very satisfying, very Moorish, absolutely gorgeous. And the final cider we have here is a little bit of extra new wave innovation, because the majority of ciders that are made in Hardanger today are presented as being very clean, very fresh, very fruit forward. But there is one eye on innovation very strongly here, and this is our last cider that we have. And it's a cider that has spent a year in the tanks and then 1 year in these ex-red wine barrels. It's undergone malolactic fermentation. It has not been filtered. It is a still product. On the nose, we definitely get the impact of a little bit of barrel itself, but also a little bit of almost that red wine characteristic, a little bit of phenolic character. Let's have a taste. Very dry, but actually malolactic gives a nice softness. It's reduced the natural acidity that's going to be in these apples. I believe there's a little bit of Bramley seedling in here. Normally very high acidity, quite bold. That's been tempered down. We've got wonderful structure and integrity, a little bit of spicy, woody earthiness, some rich phenolics on the nose. It's a very clever drink. It's a very bold, very mature drink. A grown-up's drink, you might say, even possibly, and fantastic with food it will be as well. The final thing I wanted to talk to you about was the concept of there being a geographical indication here in Hardanger, a quality mark, which we can see right here. And this is given to ciders made in Hardanger from Hardanger apples. It's very, very important for the people here that the nature, the reputation of Hardanger cider is upheld, and so these ciders bear this mark. Those that have a little bit of innovation, something other than apples within there, like hops or other fruits, they don't bear the mark just yet. This is about just protecting the nature of that classic Hardanger cider, and it's very much something worth protecting.
The dramatic Hardanger landscape ensures that those people who are growing apples and making cider within the fjord are small farmers. There are no big apple growing operations here. These are the people who for generations have honed the art of producing wonderful apples, making this fantastic raw material for cider making. When that's combined with new outside experience of fermentation, taking inspiration from other drinks, this is helping to create the amazing ciders that there are within the fjord. Something also to be celebrated are the fact that there's a greater number of women cider makers within the fjord proportionally than probably anywhere else in the world. One such person is 𝗪𝗲𝗄𝗏, producing her fantastic 𝗖𝗶𝗱𝗃 ciders.
Whether they're slightly more acid driven, slightly more fruit driven, or slightly more tannin driven, for me is secondary to it being from this place. And you should be allowed to have differentiation across. Otherwise, it would get a bit boring if there was only one type of cider that it was possible to make here.
Yeah.
It's all about the...
People like beer, people like champagne and kava, and to convince them to come over and also taste cider, there are different ways of doing it. Don't talk shit about other segments and other producers. Some people have a tendency to do it. Not the producers, but those who are very enthusiastic about the cider world. They're like, drop this champagne shit. I'm like, champagne is not shit. It's amazing. Calm down. So instead of going that way, I think introducing it as pairing with food is one of the solutions as well. Competition have more focus on things like that, the local, the sustainability, like the wine. You were not there. The lady from the wine store talked about sustainability is the main topic from now on. So having all these things going together at the same time, trying to get some of these customers who bought the champagne, the kava, to gradually come over would increase the market. At the same time, every country exports. And I know they just mention it, but if we don't do the export part, I have already started, and if we don't do the export part, it's not going to happen. 3 million liters, it's really ridiculous. And we don't have enough apples here in Hardanger to even reach that number. But it was more for the rest of the regions.
So there we have it, an exploration of one of the most magical cider making areas anywhere in the world. Norwegian cider is very exciting at the moment, and I'd thoroughly urge everybody to go to Norway and to Hardanger especially to learn more about this amazing cider industry and culture. Why not head to the Cider Festival in Hardanger in May? Some of the most amazing ciders are awaiting you. But for now, tusen takk and skål!
We also welcome our international friends to the magic fjord where the world ends. The landscape is wild and the fjord is wide. The fields are so steep you can grow grass on each side. Hardanger is like an old historic book. Welcome to the world's most famous ciderologist, Gabe Cook. Cider is Gabe's profession and passion, while cider is lifestyle, enjoyment and fashion. Mikael Stöckel and Christina 𝗖𝗍𝗃, so welcome today. You come from Germany all the way. With Cider World, you enhance and define the cider of the world to get status like wine. Harits Rodriguez is the king of cider from Spain. Bring the local to the global aspect is the biggest gain. He likes to see the cider produced where the fruit is grown, and he even makes beautiful cider of his own. Johan Sjöstedt is Sweden's great cider star. Craft cider is the most famous cider in Sweden by far. We hope your stay in Hardanger will give you inspiration to get Sweden to be a great fresh producing cider nation. Aaron Brownie, a master of his kind, produces the best cider Finland can find. To top the cider worlds is gathered, the top of the cider worlds is gathered here today. We hope your trip to Hardanger is a pleasant stay. Welcome to 𝗚𝗯𝗃, a little piece of heaven. This is a typical Norwegian 7-Eleven. Food and cider of the best kind, of the best local products we can find. Velkommen til 𝗚𝗏 som gjest til Hardanger International Cider-fest. Den beste ciderfesten i Norge, direkte fra Hardanger, Arne Torget.